Hello and welcome to another episode of Talksicology, brought to you by Recovery Unplugged. Here at Talksicology, we talk all things addiction, recovery, and mental health. Tonight's guests, fathers in recovery, Joey Grant and Stephan Marion. I'm your co-host, Jason Cabello, and as always, your host and mine, Joseph Gorordo.
Hey.
What's up, Jason?
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. What's up, audience? People out there in Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube land, welcome to the show. You've made it to Talksicology, which is the latest and greatest mental health, recovery, and addiction podcast that streams live on Facebook at 7 p.m. Central every Thursday. Did I say all the things?
Yeah, I just realized my good mic isn't plugged in.
Oh no, man! I'm up on it. Look, I got the AirPod for a monitor. I got the good mic. I got the fancy camera now. Hello from Ohio, man. I'm really excited that we are doing a Father's Day episode today, Jason.
Yeah, me too. I feel so outnumbered. I'm the only one sans child, so I'll get all your dad vibes. I do have a lot of dad jokes though, so
Excellent.
I have
Excellent. We're going to be keeping a running tally of how many dad jokes take place during this episode. So listeners, follow along. Place your bets right now on what you think the final count will be, and maybe we'll send a T-shirt to whoever gets closest to the correct number without going over. Yeah, let's do that. That sounds like a good idea. I'm really excited for Father's Day, though. You know, it's the season because I've started seeing TikToks about how Father's Day is the most under celebrated holiday. Apparently, it's number 20 on the global holiday.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Like it's behind it's behind all the big ones, right? Like it's behind Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that kind of stuff. But it's also like behind Arbor Day.
Is it behind Arbor Day?
Arbor Day is more popular than Father's Day.
I gotta love trees, oxygen and all that stuff. Shade. Dads are great. I lost my dad a few years ago, so it's I wouldn't say it's particularly tough for me on Father's Day, but it's a good time for reflection. And he got to see me clean before he died, so that's I'm adjusting my microphone here. So
I know what you're doing.
I know, just if you if those at home hear
for the audio
weirdness,
listeners,
yeah,
Jason's figuring out his microphone.
What a schlub I am, right? Like setting up the mic.
And you're
3 minutes
you're
in.
like the audio guy.
Right. Well, I had to record the voiceover on a different computer and blah, blah, blah. Fun, exciting stuff.
Oh, look, Maggie's checking in from San Antonio, Texas right now. Hey, Maggie.
Out there saving lives with Ryan Spencer.
So I don't know if you and I talked about this or not, but I have a theory.
Oh,
there's a lot of media that exists. Like think Fight Club, right?
Okay.
Think about like Brad Pitt's, monologue about like a generation of men raised by women and, the divorce generation and the, 50% divorce rate and all that kind of stuff. Now,
right.
That's been the truth in America for a long time. Either the absent father, like the dad that works, comes home, has a couple drinks, watches the news, and go to sleep. Like that very kind of distant, emotionally disconnected father has been the trope in general in America for a long time. And all the millennial dads that I know are like not only deeply invested in their children, but like deeply invested in being better for their children.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And I think we're going to see some of those tropes start changing. Like I don't have all the data or anything, but like I think dads are doing better. I think we're doing better as a whole.
I think so. I mean, most of the people that I know that are dads, whether or not they are with their with the mother or not, are very, very active in their kids' lives. And I think co-parenting has that's something new that's been kids that I grew up with, there wasn't much co-parenting. It was either like myself, my parents got divorced before I could remember. So I never saw my parents together. They were divorced when I was less than a year old, but I would spend summers with my dad and I would get to go see him, but there wasn't like a day-to-day thing where it was like
split custody. Like I don't think that I don't remember any of that growing up, but I'm a little bit older.
Yeah.
Does Mike sound better now?
Yeah, sounds much better now.
Okay, great.
And we kind of, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. We kind of jumped right into the topic just because I'm excited about the topic.
Well, yeah, you are. Joseph is like on, and I say this in all honesty. I tell it to him. Me and my girlfriend talk about it all the time. Like, you are like the quintessential like dad, but in a good way because you have great kids. I love your kids so much. Your kids are like always a pleasure to visit. I love coming over to your house, and we had Joseph's daughter Ella in one of our Recovery Unplugged commercials a couple of years back, and she was just the sweetest thing. How old was she at the time?
Oh my God. I mean, it was after COVID, right? COVID was already a thing.
Yeah, it was right when
So it
things
must
started
have been
opening up a little bit.
2020. Yeah.
Yeah, probably like late
So
2020, early
So
21.
she's 4. So she was probably 2. She's probably just turned 2.
Yeah, and we got to we were filming. The scene it was scripted. We were filming a birthday party, so she got to have another birthday party, and we got her cake, we got her presents, we got her candy, and she had the best time. She was so sweet. She was, you would expect a kid that age.
She had a pretend birthday party. It was great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
But enough about that. Why don't we get to press radio and films? We haven't done it in a couple weeks, and I think we got some good stuff today.
All right, let's do it.
Press radio and film.
So Jason, you brought this up when we were talking earlier, in regards to Bam Margera. What's going on with Bam Margera?
So up until late yesterday, they had said that he went AWOL from a court-appointed rehab out in Delray.
He was Marchman acted. Of course.
Correct. And there goes the topo. And he was in Delray, Florida, at a treatment center. And then he just kind of went AWOL. Nobody could find him. But then I guess he posted some pictures with like an AA sponsor or something, and then they got him back. So that's good to hear. It's man, it's got to be tough because I was dead ass broke when I went into treatment. I can't imagine like going into treatment with like millions and millions of dollars at your disposal, and how hard,
Yeah.
good problems.
I've talked to people who were legit millionaires in their active addiction, and they say it is much worse to have all the money in the world.
Yeah, I could imagine. I was in treatment one time, and then I found out that I had gotten a tax return for like $1,200, which was like $1 million to me at the time. So I get
Absolutely. it. Yeah. Yeah, Bam, wherever you are, we know you're an avid listener, and we
friend of the show.
I know Bam's struggled. It's been very public. He's been in and out several times over the years. But one thing that gives me some hope for him is that I know that there's people around him. You got Brandon Novak, you got Steve-O, who are sober dudes, like active in recovery sober dudes. Yeah. So he knows that there's a way out.
On the other end of the spectrum, though, you always got those hangers-on who would love to be just there and like, hey, man, you know what I mean? It's got to be when you're that high profile, you get it from both angles. But if he didn't relapse, I know he's got over a year sober at this point. According to what's been posted on him. So hopefully it's good, and wish him well. Delray's a tough place to run the streets in.
And I wanted to touch on for Press Radio and Films just a documentary that I watched many years ago called The Other F Word. And in case you're wondering, The Other F Word is fatherhood. And Jason, I don't know if you've ever seen this.
No, I haven't. Tell me about it.
It's the main guy. They follow the lead singer from Pennywise when he decides to leave the band to be a better dad. And so they interview Fat Mike from NoFX. They interview Flea. They interview Tony Hawk. They interview Mark Hoppus from Blink, and all these different punk rock dads. And if we'd had more time, I would have gone and pulled the scene. There's this one scene with like Fat Mike waking up hungover from a show the night before, and he like gets up to go make his kids waffles, and he's And he turns it on for them, even though he's feeling like garbage. And I thought that was but yeah, that's just my plug. Shout out to Fat Mike and all the punk rock dads out there.
I used to book shows out in South Florida, and I booked No Effects at a club, Revolution, that I used to work at, and we partied. Fat Mike and I.
You party with Fat
Oh
Mike?
yeah, oh yeah. Over and over and over again all night. It was like one of those like, hey, do you know where I could get? I'm like, yeah, of course I know where I could get it. I work at nightclubs in Fort Lauderdale, and I had to go back for the guy or get deliveries like probably like 7 or 8 times. It was a long night.
Oh man, I want to hear more about this offline.
Yeah.
But shall we get to it?
Yeah, sure.
All right, we've had our guests waiting long enough. So today we have 2 guests. We have 2 wonderful guests. First off, we have a good, very old friend of mine. Got sober around the same time. He's now the director of Real Deal Recovery. They call it something else now. RD Wellness. And he's a wonderful father in recovery that I love hearing from when I get to see him when I'm up in Dallas. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephan Marion.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, welcome,
What's up, Stephan?
Stephan.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And then Jason, why don't you introduce our second guest?
Our second guest is a friend of mine who I met out in Nashville a few years ago. He was actually client number 1 in our Nashville facility. And, every time I go out there, me and him get to chat and go to meetings together. And he's just such a great guy. And he's come a long way. My friend, Joey Grant.
Hey.
Hello.
Joey, you got a lamp. You look good. Love it. But thank you guys both for being here. I guess let's just start at the beginning. Did either of y'all imagine yourself being a dad? Like, was that something y'all wanted, or was it something that happened?
It was something I had planned against, honestly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Not well enough.
Yeah, not well enough. But no, it was one of those things that a lot of addiction on both sides of the family. And I was just like, I don't know if I want to, bring another child into the world and possibly have them predisposed to something like that. My brother was the same way,
like, we're not doing this to somebody else on purpose.
Right. Yeah.
Joey, how about you? Did you want to be a dad, plan to be a dad, or?
I didn't plan to be, but I could see where I probably always longed to, because looking up to my dad or the men in my life that were good dads, that was the light part of it, and then the bad parts were the dark, but I always longed for the feeling that I got from a good father, whether it was mine or another. It was something that I always kind of didn't know nothing about, but longed for it, I guess.
Yeah. Awesome. So you guys are both in recovery, and one of the reasons that we kind of chose the 2 of you to be on the show today is because you have some different experiences, right? Joey, you were a dad before you got sober, and Stephan, you became a dad once you were in recovery. So Joey, why don't we start with you? Tell us just a little bit about what was going on in your life, that led you to seek recovery. Just a little bit about how you ended up.
When I was about 28 was the first time that I ever went to any kind of treatment. And the only reason why I ever went to treatment was because I found out my girlfriend, who I'd only had for 2 or 3 months, was pregnant. And it was that father thing. It wasn't planned at all. I had been in trouble and in sober living houses or halfway houses and jail, from the time I was 18 up to 28. Wanting to live a better life, knowing I was capable of it, not having any idea how to go about it. And once I always had this thing where, whether it was the girlfriend, the job, school, a different living situation, or a son, whatever I could throw in that black hole, I thought it would fix me. And that my son was the first thing that I was like, first time I was like absolutely ready to overhaul, and all the risk, the money I owed, the probation I was on, it don't matter. I'm going to get help however I need to go about doing that.
Love it. Love it. And Stephan, how about you? You know, what first led you into recovery, even before obviously before you were a dad, but
Yeah.
kind of give us a little snippet of how you ended up living this life.
How I ended up in rehab.
Yeah.
Well, it was 7 times. 7 times. 5 in the same place in Michigan where Eminem went to treatment. I was actually there before and right after him. But I'd been drinking and all that stuff since I was like 11 or 12 years old, and it progressed through and became a DJ for a lot of years, which where it was acceptable to kind of do whatever you wanted to do, right? And eventually my addiction got so bad that the guy I DJ'd with for years, like I had radio shows with, had been to Europe with, he just said he's done. He still hasn't talked to me still to this day.
Wow.
That's 15 plus years ago. And on the back end of my life falling apart there, I went to treatment the first time and unsuccessful. And I ended up down in the hill country in July of 2010. Heard a different kind of message from a guy with the old eye patch on there.
Yep.
And for the first time, it made sense. Been an atheist for 25 years, and no one had ever explained why God was the answer until someone explained what the problem was. And once I understood the problem, the rest of it made a lot of sense to me. Before then, it was just a bunch of slogan slinging and handshaking and nonsensical BS. No depth or weight behind the message until I ended up in Kerrville, and it forever changed my life.
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
We hear a lot about Kerrville on this show.
We talk about Kerrville on this show. Yeah. Jason sobered up out in Florida, and
God bless you.
Jason.
Yeah.
Jason goes to that other fellowship.
Jason does.
But no, yeah. Sometimes Kerrville comes up fairly often on this show.
Yeah.
So Joey, how old was your son when you got sober? You just have the one?
Yeah.
Yeah. How old was he when you got sober?
When I first went to treatment, he was about 6. Well, no, it was before he was born. My first time going, and I relapsed immediately after he was born. It was probably 2 or 3 months, and then I went to treatment again when he was about 4 months. Again when he was like 8, and then the last time he was about 1.5 years, and now he's 3. So it was many tries at it, and like I said, I always thought, man, if I have a son and I get to be a father, or it was just always outside of me, whatever would fix me. And that was the last thing that was on my checklist of things that might possibly keep me from doing drugs and couldn't, but it was the one that I pursued the suggestions the most after. But he was about 1.5 years when it finally started sticking. But it was a whole process through his very young age.
And I know there was some issues with him not being in your life for a while. I know at least when we first met that you had to do some serious work to get him back into your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Like I said, when he was born, I had got out of treatment for my first time ever. So I was sober when I was at the hospital when he was born. And within 2 or 3 months, I was using again. And, the addict thing, I got this. It's going to be okay. When you walk out of the storm shelter and the tornado tore everything down and you say, mighty fine, the wind stopped blowing. I did that 2 or 3 times. And the in-laws and his mother, rightfully were like, hey, you can't come see him. You can't pick him up. You're going to have to, your actions speak so loud we can't hear a word you say. And
you're like, but I haven't done drugs in 30 days. Doesn't that mean like I'm good?
Yeah. It's like, man, you're breaking my heart. It was still outside of me why I got this problem. And that was part of it. I don't get to see him. Okay, well, I'll self-sabotage because, it's y'all, not me.
I'll show you what I could do to me.
Yeah, the insanity of it. But it was rough the first few times, and every time it got a little bit better, but I started doing what I was supposed to and handing over the results and doing what I was supposed to anyway after trying a few times.
That's like the biggest recovery secret, like I did what I was supposed to do, right? Like Stephan knows about this kind of stuff, right? I was speaking for a group of clients that were in treatment earlier this week, and one of them asked me, like, at the end of my, after my story, he was like, well, what was different the last time you went to treatment? Like, what did they do different at the rehab? And I was like, they didn't do anything different at the rehab. I just followed directions, So
I definitely didn't hear anything different the 20th time I went to treatment.
No.
But so one thing that's really interesting is how, like, when Stephan, when you were talking about, getting sober, you really talked about like the amount of things you lost. And it sounded almost like you were tired of losing, whereas Joey, you had kind of lost everything and didn't really care. You had something pulling you forward, which was like trying to get to your son. So I don't know. I just think that's really interesting. But so how do you guys see your recovery showing up in your parenting? Like, do you think that the way that you parent is influenced by the fact that you practice a spiritual program of recovery? Stephan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's it does, like, especially like in looking at where you were wrong. And that comes into play a lot in parenting for me. I started parenting, a child from like when she was 2.5 and like didn't have the whole process before it, and inadvertently just kind of went back to how I was parented, right? And I have great parents. It's just, I come from, my parents are in their 70s. They were raised pretty strictly. Their parents before them even more so. And so, my initial reaction is just to kind of do what I was shown, which is to be extremely strict, and like come to find out that like that's not necessarily the proper way to parent in every situation. And being able to, take instruction from somebody else and realize that, kind of like the 12 steps, there's other people that have done this before me and they've done it better or in a different way, and that it's okay to learn from them, and it's okay to admit that, how I was parenting was like obviously not the most effective, and to take lessons from that. And like recovery's, it's made me less like, just like, this is like, this is it, like
my way or the highway,
right? It's not to say that process doesn't take longer than it should sometimes, because there's still a part of me that's like that, but just to look at it and see that there's better ways to do some things, and there's people that can guide you along that path, kind of like the 12 steps were.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've had to make amends to my kids. Like, okay, like, you know what? Daddy should not have yelled. It was wrong of me to get upset like that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily say like, what can I do to make it right to the 4-year-old, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, I own my part, and then I'm like, but you still shouldn't have rubbed spaghetti all over your body or whatever.
That's a good way to apply the 10th step in your everyday, I guess, if you have kids. Like I said earlier, I'm the only one on here without children, so it's like this is kind of out of my wheelhouse. But I mean, so Joseph, you too, you had your kids all after you got sober.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
I was like 9 months sober when Chelsea got pregnant with Harper.
It's so funny.
I think so I got sober in 2008. Stephan got sober in July of 2010. I think by the time he got to Kerrville, I was already a dad.
Very young dad. Young dad.
Yeah, Harper was born December 2009. So yeah, I was like taking my 6-month-old to meetings and stuff at that point.
And you know it's so funny, and a lot of people who I do know had kids in very early recovery and are like terrific parents, but that's the one thing, like when you're in treatment, they're like, don't get in a relationship, definitely don't even get a pet, let alone have a kid. But then I've seen so many good stories come out of that it's like,
well, we even tell professionals, like if someone's a doctor or a lawyer, we're like, look, don't go back to being a doctor or a lawyer just yet. Like, go get a job at
work
Denny's.
at Chipotle or something.
Yeah. No, it's
That'll fix you up.
though. It's true.
Yeah.
Joey, how about you, man? Where do you see recovery and the principles of recovery showing up in your parenting with your son?
Man, that's a good question. I believe my biggest problem with those first few times and my son being young and me trying to get into recovery was I'd put being a father first, and they say anything I put before my recovery, I'll lose. And if I put recovery before anything I gain, it's not, I finally stopped striving to be a father or what I imagined one would be. And I wanted to be in recovery. And I focused on that, which helped every aspect of being a father, every aspect of every part of my life. And like y'all were saying, what was my part in it? Whatever this anger is, powerlessness, unmanageability, the 10th step at night, do I owe an apology? Me doing those things and surrendering outcomes and one more day, I just got to do it just for today. If I had a bad day and I was on my phone too much when I was with him and I feel guilty about it, tomorrow won't be the same. But it was the recovery part that finally clicked to me was, if I don't have this, then I don't have him. Instead of, if I get to be a father, then all this will come behind it. And that's just not the case for me. I had to put the recovery, and I get to put the recovery first. It's one of the greatest assets of my life. It's not optional whether I do some of these, practice these principles, do this work, and gain empathy from helping another person. It's not a business decision or a father decision. It's a living decision. And once that finally clicked, it was that it seemed to work. I put the recovery first. I'm a father nonetheless, but I've got to do those things.
There's this line in the Big Book, where they talk about, uncommon sense becoming common sense. And that's one of those things that I think falls in that category, right? That idea that like your recovery has to come before wife, kids, job, family, everything. Because if you don't prioritize that, eventually you're going to be a piece of shit in every other category. Or at least for me, that's what I tell myself. Y'all aren't pieces of shit, but I can be.
For those who might not know, when we talk about the 10th step, it's about taking a daily inventory of your actions.
Yeah. So I have a question. So we've talked about it a couple times already tonight, but the genetics, right? Obviously we know that there's a genetic component to addiction. I know that because I'm not going to say what I do, but like, do you guys have that same fear of like, hey, like my kid has my genetics, he could very well go down the same path as I have, and what have you done, if anything, to try to prevent that?
Yeah, it's definitely worry, whether it's genetics or some of the newer science, which is saying trauma is passed down generationally, like generational trauma, and most of the new science says that trauma is a heavy driving force behind addiction. Either way, whether it's genetic or the trauma, it's still concerning. Like 100%. I still actively do therapy. My wife still does active therapy. Plus, we both have mental health on both sides of our family as well. Like it's something that we have to talk about and look at quite regularly. And just trying to stay as open-minded about your kids and how they're expressing themselves or what might be coming up. But yeah, it's definitely a concern. I hope that having been through all of this, and on the other side of it, it would be easier for me to pick some of this stuff up earlier. But that could just be me being naive. I don't know. Like it's been 12 years. I still work in addiction. I still see it every day, but would I see it early in my kids or not?
I used to think that like, yeah, my kids, they're not going to get anything past me, right? Like I'll spot this stuff early. But then it was, experiences with other friends who are in recovery led me to realize like just kind of how hard it is to spot that stuff in people you love versus, a client or a family that you don't have that personal connection to. Joey, what about you? What are you doing, if anything, to kind of help stave off the genetic lottery for your child?
Man, and ironically, I went to the treatment center the first time, almost 20 years to the day that my dad went to.
Huh.
And he didn't keep on going. And it took me 4 times. And, just a lot of staying in the pocket and trying. And I just keep on with the recovery thing. I keep on trying to help other people and be present with my son and let him know I love him and I'm gentle, and whatever he does, I love him so much. I want him to do that. But at the same time, the empathy, I feel like a lot of addicts have so much of. I see it with my son, and we're just alike in a lot of things. I see myself where the way he focuses on stuff, the way he looks at things, just a lot of things, and I think about that often. But I practice surrendering outcomes and doing the best I can on the work I put. I work as hard as I can, give up the results, and try my best daily, and don't get too caught up on what might happen, because it sure can, with out of my control. The genetics, it's a genetic lottery, and
Yeah.
I just got to do my part in it.
So you just said something really interesting to me. You said, make sure that my son knows that I'm gentle or something like that. And I think that's really important, because I mean, what we see historically, right? Like if you look at movies, like I'm thinking of like the movie American Beauty, right? Like the Marine dad that kicks his son out for being gay, and there's a lot of that stereotype throughout history, right? Like wait till your dad comes home, like he, getting out the belt, or just that idea of like, I think as men, right, we're often taught to use anger, right, or generating fear in the other person to get what we want, right? Like you better get out of my face, all that kind of language, right? I don't, which at least for me is very counter to who I want to be as a dad, right?
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to fear me and do what I want, right?
So
Go ahead, Jason.
my dad, he was born in Mexico, so there, a little bit of machismo with him, but he died in active addiction. He died of cancer, but he died in active addiction, and he always thought that I should have learned from his mistakes, and was definitely. I mean, he was a good dad. He wasn't there in like my daily life. He lived across the country, and like I said earlier, I'd spend like summers with him. But I remember one time, because my parents were very liberal. My mom and my stepdad, very liberal in the music business. I was raised around a lot of really crazy shit. And I'm with my dad in California, and I'm probably 7 years old. And we're driving around some pretty sketchy neighborhoods in East LA. And he's doing some deals, and we get back to his apartment, and I'm just like, "Oh, you got some coke?" And he freaked the fuck out that I knew what coke was. Not that he was doing this in front of me, but that I knew what it was. It was like that was the issue. And thinking back on that, it's just, I mean, I was 7. Why would I have known what, coke was or smelled like or anything like that? But that's next week's episode.
At least you were like, man, they ripped you off. That was bad.
Yeah. That's all cut, Dad.
But so what do you guys think about? I mean, are you guys actively trying to break that stereotype or not fill that stereotype? And what are the alternatives, besides, fear and anger, to like help parent and discipline a child? Stephan.
Well, part of the problem is like anger traditionally has been like one of the only acceptable emotions that men are allowed to show.
Absolutely.
Without being called one of a million disgusting names, right? And I'm still a Gen Xer, at the very end of it, but I'm still like Gen X, and like that was very much a part of that, males can express anger, and that's kind of about it, or happiness.
Yeah, Angry or happy, and that's all
angry
you
or
get.
happy,
Yeah.
and that was it. And it's and that's what was modeled. Like I didn't see my father cry until his father had passed. You know, like my whole life like that. And so trying to break out of those stereotypes and like even like to yourself that like it is okay to express like these other emotions that are real and are always been there. And I think learning to do that and becoming vulnerable with your children, like I'm seeing that I'm less prone to become angry, right? Because if like I stuff all of that stuff, it's going to come out one of the only two ways that I know, which is anger or happiness. And if I'm hiding all of those negative emotions, it's not going to come out as happiness. That's for sure.
You know, that's still one of the hardest things for me, you know, even like as a therapist and someone who's pretty okay talking about heavier things in you know, relationships and stuff like that. At home, it's like, you know, I got to be the happy guy. The anger, not so much, you know, but one thing that my wife gets on my case about a lot is anytime one of the kids is hurt and I'm not around, you know, like if it's like, oh, you know, I sprained my ankle at soccer today. One of the first questions out of my mouth to the boys is, did you cry? And I don't mean it like you better not have cried. You know, I'm just trying to gauge how bad it was, you know, like, did you cry or not? But my wife's like, no, like you can't ask that immediately because they're going to think that like that's the most important thing to you. You know, it's like, did they cry or not? Joey, how about you? You know, what are your thoughts on all this stuff? You know, with like kind of toxic masculinity. You know, trying to model something different for our kids. You know,
Being mindful, like what you said about the you know, did you cry thing. When things get brought to my attention, or I bring them myself, like, man, that felt bad when because I do get angry, and or you know, it don't act out like it does, but you know, driven by 100 forms of fear, and I'm more often hurt than I am angry. It shows itself in my spiritual condition. I'm usually not so angry. I just don't know how to say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, or this is happening, and it's overwhelming. Blah, you know. But at the same time, my son knows I'm the discipline. Like, it's time to get in the bath, or daddy's going to give you a bath. And, you know, he runs straight to mama, hops in the bath. And I don't yell. I don't say nothing. I'm just more disciplined, as in, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to sit here with you until we're able to do this. Hold you, hug you, kiss you, tell you it's going to be all right. But it's not optional, and I don't have to force it. You know, I got all the time. That's what I practice a lot too, is when he won't brush his teeth or something, because he's just like me. He's hard headed, and I have to, you know, I say, you're just like your mom, but it's really me. And I'm like, all right, we'll just sit here until you're ready, buddy, you know, and be encouraging about it. Try to be gentle, you know, and sometimes I'm quick to, hey, we ain't doing this, and that it'll rise up in me. But I notice it and try not to let my outside world of being a father and the things I have in life and future, past, whatever it is, not run me so much, and just take it a day at a time. And then I realize the anger is almost in line with my faith and my the things I'm practicing every day, and the discipline I have with myself. But realizing I have a problem and proceeding to work on it, and the way people are realizing being a father is there's a theory to it, and it's not just go out and wing it.
I have something that I'd like to hear from all three of you, but Stephan, do you remember the first time that you noticed that you were like breaking a cycle where it was like, I'm not doing what I feel like I should be hardwired, what I should be doing, like that's hardwired in me right now, but I'm actually taking the time thinking about it, you know, playing the tape all the way through or whatnot?
Um, I think it was more pointed out to me, honestly, the first time. Like because I think I just reacted to a situation, and like my wife was the one that like grabbed me and said, "Hey, like what's going on?"
Right.
Right, and like, and it caught me off guard because like nobody really asks you what's going on, and so like I had to like stop and think about it for a minute, and I'm just like, yeah, like I think I'm just like kind of fell into autopilot there and like just reacted kind of like how I've seen, and like well, my wife's she's like a fantastic parent, and it was her, you know, she's the one that kind of challenged me to look at some of this stuff and to be a better parent, right? Like here's some books to read,
And she's in recovery as well?
in her own way. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph, what about you?
So I wanted to be a dad like when I was in high school.
Mhm.
Like I already knew that like not while I was in high school, but like I knew in high school I
Right.
knew that someday I wanted to be a dad. And I was, the fact that my parents divorced when I was really young and that my dad was very much absent for the most part of my childhood was always a big part of my story, right? Like who I was and why I did things. And so my goal was always, I set the bar real low. My goal was to stay married longer than my parents stayed married and to live in the same home as my children longer than my father ever did. So as soon as Harper turned about 4 years old, I beat both those goals.
Wow. Fantastic.
But no, I mean, it's very much, not so much anymore, but in the beginning, like there was very much this sense of just wanting to be better than him, just wanting to do a better job than he did. And I think I have, but also like it's not driven by spite anymore.
Right.
I've done some work around that animosity at this point, but very much so it was pure resentment.
And that's a lot of recovery at work there. It's like a lot of times like we don't know what to do, but we absolutely know what not to do. And like, sometimes that's
just
like
don't get high.
The first thing, right? I mean, simple stuff like that. You're going to be like, I'm not going to like lose my temper. I'm not going to, that I can't, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to act on emotion, right? Like I know what not to do. And sometimes I feel it's a lot more important. And everything else will work itself out.
Joey, how about you?
The cycle breaking, like I said, 20 years to the day, we went to the same treatment center, and then I was drinking and using again, and I went right back, and then I went back, and I went back, and I remember talking to my dad about anonymous programs, and he's like, all they do is whine, and I hated going to those meetings, and I continued to go to those meetings. Yeah. The problem's not them,
Mm-hmm.
It's a spiritual axiom, and calling another man a lot to talk about my problems, that was something that he would have never ever done, and a lot
vulnerable.
of it was hard for me. Yeah. I was vulnerable and willing to learn and take advice and admit my wrongs, and get knocked down and get back up, and knock down and back up, and try and try and try, and not force it as much. White knuckling it, just run off pride and ego. That was a hard thing. That was what I couldn't figure out, but I just kept on trying and listening to suggestions and getting out of my way.
I always say that it's one of the hardest things in the world when you're first coming in, to go up to another man at a meeting and be like, "Hey, is it cool if I call you every day for the rest of my life?"
Can I get your phone number, bud? But you bring up a great point, and I'd never actually thought of this. It's like with my dad in particular, right? Not once has he ever owned anything that he did wrong. And so like that is a cycle breaking thing, right?
Yeah.
That, we as men, as dads, we'll own it to a 4-year-old, right? Like, hey, I shouldn't have done that. Sorry. So Joe, you mentioned something about your faith earlier. So, follow up to that is, have either of you guys started to think about spirituality for your child, or trying to introduce spirituality to your children in any way?
I'll go. My son goes to a lot of meetings with me. He holds hands with us after, some people get to hold him while we're in there. He sees me pray, get on my knees and stuff. And he's not at the age where we can have a conversation about it, but I try to do the things that help me without telling him that he needs to do it. Love him so much that I'm going to let him figure it out, but I'm not going to hold back on what has helped me. And it'll be interesting when that comes along. I'll still bring him to meetings and events and fellowship with people and hug men. When I see guys in recovery out in public, I give them hugs. We was talking about that the last meeting Jason was with me at here in Nashville.
Oh, you were at the zoo?
At the zoo, and I hugged him in the middle of the food court because I ain't seen him in a few months. And, my son will see that stuff, and hopefully it's a good example. And I don't ever want him to feel like it's not his choice. But, I will present it to him as it comes. And if he ever wants to talk about it. But my actions speak so loud they can't hear a word I say.
And even that's so cool. Just the idea that like men can hug each other and it should be okay, and like it shouldn't even be a conversation, Stephan, how about you? Have you started looking at ways to introduce spirituality to your kids?
Like we have our kids in a Christian summer school, all three of them. The two of them go to it all the time. But like I was raised like at the very end of like the fire and brimstone Catholicism, went to Catholic grade school, high school, like uniforms, like 8 years old, like your best friend is going to hell because he was baptized in a different Christian religion kind of stuff.
Wow.
And so like and that drove me away from spirituality and God for a long, long time. And so like I try to be pretty mindful about what I present or, how I approach that, because like that's the last thing I would ever want to do to my kids is like push an idea on them to the point like where they completely reject it. Or my daughter said the other day she wanted to welcome Christ into her heart, and that was a decision that was all on her own. She's 8. You know what I mean? Like that's a pretty cool deal, and it's not from us pushing, right? I think that's a pretty cool deal, just to kind of let a child like explore some of their own things and come to their own decisions on that. And she was extremely excited. She gets a day out with mom to celebrate and everything, and she's pretty pumped up. I was pretty happy. It was a lot different for me.
Yeah, we didn't have a choice. You just did it because you're supposed to. You that made you do it.
Yeah, there was no choice. It was like you would be ostracized by the other kids in your school if you decided to step up against any of it. Yeah,
we're going to Mexico next month to go see a good family friend do his confirmation. Nice. So my kids, I have not. I have my kids are unchurched, I think is the language that we use nowadays. And so they're like, well, what's confirmation? I was like, oh, that's like when you're older and like they baptized you without your permission, but at confirmation you get to say like, you know what, like I want to do this for real. And he was like, oh, okay, so you did that when you were like 15, like our friend who's doing it? And I was like, no, I was like 7. They were just like, here you go, you're confirmed.
Yeah.
With my kids, we've tried to do some like meditation type stuff with them. Like we used to have this little jar that we would shake up with glitter, and like they had to like stare at it until like their thoughts calmed down, and we would do that. And my oldest boy, he went through some depression last year after he broke his leg and like couldn't play soccer or do anything all summer. And we got him a little it was like a morning journal for kids. It was like, 3 things you're grateful for. We do gratitudes a lot with them, like at nighttime and stuff. And we just kind of try to introduce some spirituality like that.
Yeah, I was at Joseph's house about a year or so ago, and the kids were like bored, and Joseph gave them a couple of options, and meditation was one of them. Like, you go
Yeah.
meditate for a few minutes, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever fucking seen. I've never experienced anything like that.
And 9 times out of 10, when I tell them to go meditate, they go to their room and they say, "Hey, Alexa, play whatever music." But hey, I'll take it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? What else are we supposed to talk about today? I'm trying to look at these show notes.
So what I'm curious about is knowing, what all of us have been through or put ourselves through, right? Letting a child kind of find their own way and take their own path, but then you see a danger zone approaching. I mean, all of your kids are, I believe, too young to actually be there. But Joseph, your oldest is getting to that age to where it's like you're paying attention to these things. You have great kids, though. But I mean, at what point do you think, if you saw like some kind of danger zone, like your kid's heading in the wrong path, how would you tackle that? You just went mute.
No,
Joseph.
oh,
There you go.
something that I said earlier about Alexa caused the Alexa in the kitchen to start
She's
playing
listening.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me 2
Alexa,
seconds
play
here.
Chumbawamba. Did I just set off your Alexa?
No, I fixed it, but she started playing like some weird, like late 90s new metal, kind of like, chuggy guitars and a guy going,
Nice.
But so you're asking about like the conversation, yeah, like the talk.
Yeah, or I mean, maybe even a little bit something. Well, yeah, let's start with the talk.
Well, so we've talked a lot about like modeling and actions, and so like my kids, I spend a lot of time with my kids, right? Like I am involved. I drive with them places, all that kind of stuff. So, and I also have a job working in treatment that isn't confined to a 9 to 5. So, they've been listening to conversations about alcohol and drugs and mental health, probably for as long as they can remember, and Harper, he's slow, he kind of put together that like I help people not do drugs and that I don't drink, but and so like they've known I'm in recovery for a while, but it was only last summer when my oldest is going through his depression, he was getting into middle school, 12 years old, that I kind of told him like some of the specifics, like, listen, like, your dad's in recovery, he doesn't drink, but you need to know that like I shot heroin, buddy. Like, and you have my genetics, so that means you need to be a little careful about some things,
Right.
So they don't. So he knows some of the details, and he knows some of like how much I hurt my mother while I was in my addiction and that kind of stuff. And I mean, he was kind of mad at me when we had the talk, so I don't think he necessarily he didn't give me a lot of feedback. He was just kind of like, okay, whatever. So I don't know. We probably need to revisit it at this point. Stephan, so your oldest is what, like 9?
8-ish?
8. So
she knows.
Any talks yet?
She knows. Well, she knows I don't drink. Right? She's never seen that. In-laws, everybody drinks. We don't have people drink to excess around them though either, right? Like that's a choice I get to make today too, right? We're not trying to model heavy drinking in front of our children like it was, modeled in front of me. She knows that daddy helps people, and that I don't drink. That's kind of where it's at right now. But like as it's more age appropriate, like those conversations definitely will happen. That, like, like I am in recovery, and like, bits and pieces of what it was like, age suitable will come up, I'm sure, but it's just not something that like we sit around and talk about. I think she's like a pretty inquisitive child and would not be satisfied with anything but some like hard answers. So like,
Look at some details here.
yeah, she's a really smart child, and so like I don't want to raise too many questions in her that she'll go hunting down answers for just yet. But yeah, it's something that like I definitely will talk with her about, and but not just the addiction part, the mental health part as well.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Yeah.
it's not just one, it's like both you've got to watch out for.
And kids nowadays are so much more aware of mental health, and like they have language that like I didn't know until I was a professional.
Right.
That these kids already know.
Yeah.
Joey, I mean, with your son, I mean, he's real young, right? 3.5. So like he probably just thinks you have a lot of friends, right? You just like going to meetings. You got this weird club that you're in.
Yeah. I do. I notice I find myself talking to my son like he's my friend, and I've had people say that, like, man, you're a good dad. You talk to your son like you're talking to somebody who can speak as much as you, and I feel like that's the thing with being a father now is, yes, you're my son, but you're also my friend. And when those things rise or he has questions, I'm still going to guide and discipline the best I can, but I'm also going to have some open communication like I do with friends. And men in recovery are a big part of my life now. Like I ask for help and how to handle situations or how people do things. And they have kids, and it'll always be something that I'm aware will have to come up. And luckily, I get to practice recovery and have other men who have done it before me when that time comes, just like y'all speaking about it. And it'll be something that it'll be like a friend thing, hopefully, and won't be too racy, because I feel like I practice honesty in all my affairs, and that would be something with my kid more, toned down than I would with a grown man that's a friend.
Yeah.
But it would still be a sincere, open conversation.
You can be honest and age appropriate at the same time, I think. Well, listen, gentlemen, I wish this was like an 1.5-hour episode, because I feel like we could still get into some real heavy recovery stuff here too. Like I feel like we hit all the dad stuff, and I know at the very least me and Stephan can really chop it up on some of these ideas about recovery and mental health.
Yeah.
But we'll save that for another episode. So we're getting towards the end of our time, so I think it's time for rapid fire questions.
It's rapid fire question time.
Oh yeah, I love that. The testosterone surge just goes. All right, guys, we got 5 questions for you. We're gonna go pretty fast. I think we'll alternate who gets to go first. Stephan, if you could be any Avenger, which Avenger would you be?
Oh wow. Being the Canadian, I'd have to pick Captain America.
Great answer, Joey. How about you? Which Avenger?
Iron Man.
Nice. Just for the money.
Well, the humor, the wittiness. I like the attitude.
Awesome.
So, Joey, what is the least favorite song that you play for your kid that he loves?
Ooh.
Oh man.
Baby Shark. I've heard it so much. Yeah.
Stephan?
I think we're on the same page on that one. Anything Coco Melon? I know the words. I sing along now.
All the Coco Melon songs are wrong. They're all wrong. They sing. Yeah. Okay,
I know nothing about this universe.
Coco Melon, man. Stephan, if you were a flavor of ice cream, what would that entail?
What would it be?
Yeah. Something with maple syrup.
Yeah, yeah. Maple syrup and gravy and French fries or something.
Yeah.
Pralines and cream.
Nice. Joey.
Something with caramel, vanilla, caramel, or the turtle,
Mm.
something like
Turtle,
that.
yeah.
Mixture.
I'm a big turtle fan.
All right, Joey, give us your best dad joke.
Why does a duck have feathers? So you
Why?
can't see its butt quack. Kids love that.
That's pretty good.
Oh my god.
Stephan.
That's pretty bad. Mine would be the knock knock
Who's there?
banana.
Banana who?
Knock knock
Who's there?
Who's there?
banana.
This is riveting. Banana
Yeah.
who?
Knock knock
Who's there?
orange.
Orange who?
Orange, you glad I didn't say banana?
Classic.
Nice.
Classic. That's that is the joke that gets my kids, two youngest ones, laughing the hardest.
Oh man. Oh, mine's too long. Okay. Last but not least, Stephan. Who would win in a fight? Bill Wilson or Bob Smith?
Bob.
Joey.
I think Bob.
Mm,
Okay, so I'm curious. Why? Why do we think Bob would win in a fight? They were both big dudes.
they
Long
were
range
both
on
big
both of them.
dudes. Yeah, I think Bob was a little bit bigger though.
Just that Bob was just bigger.
Bob was bigger. Yeah, I think he'd know how to kill a man in multiple different ways.
Yeah, he's a doctor.
Yeah, he's a doctor.
Bill was a soldier.
Are these guys from Coco Melon?
Hey, you want to hear
Yeah.
my favorite dad joke? Y'all know what
Yeah.
NA stands for? Nah.
You win.
No offense to anybody in NA. We love NA. It's all good fun. All right, guys. Well, that brings us to the end of rapid fire questions. Before we wrap it up, I'd like to give each one of you an opportunity to just say leave our listeners with one final thought, whether it be about recovery, fatherhood, or anything else in between. Joey, why don't you go first?
I could never imagine I'd get to have conversations that are help me and get to be vulnerable and all these things. I heard somebody say, my recovery, my addiction, all the vices I've had in my life, recovery has turned them into my greatest assets. And that's with being a father, being a student, being an electrician, being a sponsor, anything. It took the worst things about me that I just knew were just terminally ill and turned them into the greatest things in my life today. And the proof is all around me. Just took some time and pressure.
Nice.
Love it. Thank you, Joey. Stephan, last word.
Man, like honestly, like fatherhood is like the bright spot of my life. Like the book talks about, like a much more important demonstration lies in our homes and our prospective careers and other things like that. And despite not wanting to have children, I can't even begin to think of like the loss that I would have endured by not having those, by not having, 3 kids. And like they've challenged me to grow in my recovery in different ways and to figure out new forms of balance and new practices and everything like that. I'm forever grateful for my children.
You guys are giving me baby fever.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. You and Gabby, go for it.
Yeah, man.
All right, guys. Well, just thank you one more time to both of our guests, Joey and Stephan. Thank you guys for taking the time out to have this conversation. Thank you to all our listeners. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. Thank you, as always, to the greatest co-host in all the land, Jason Cabello. And from all of us here at Talksicology, there's 1,000 ways in, there's 1,000 ways out. And we hope you find yours.
Woohoo!
Yay!
2.5.
That was